Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us at today's program featuring artist William Camargo, presented as part of the Wignall Museum's Home Edition, a series of curated artist talks, workshops, and discussions featuring artists and cultural workers. My name is Rebecca Trawick, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm the director and curator of the Wignall Museum. The Wignall Museum is a teaching museum and interdisciplinary art space that introduces Chaffey College students, faculty, staff, and community members to innovative contemporary art objects and ideas. By fostering critical thinking, visual literacy, discourse, and empathy, the museum seeks to enhance the intellectual and cultural life of our community. We want to take a moment to recognize that we are situated on the Rancho Cucamonga campus of Chaffey College, which resides on the traditional and unceded lands of the Tongva people. We offer our recognition and respect to the elders, both past, present, and future.
And hello, my name is Roman Stollenwerk. I'm assistant curator at the Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. All sessions of Home Edition will be recorded. When possible, recordings will be made available on our website. Please visit us at www.chaffey.edu/Wignall to access our full schedule of programs and available recordings. An announcement will post to our email subscribers and social media when new videos are available. All recordings on our site include captions and audio descriptions as options. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Andy Hadel. I'm the preparator at the museum. Along with Rebecca and Roman, I'll be assisting with today's Zoom session. Let me share a quick breakdown of today's program. In a moment, William will present for about a half an hour or longer, with the remaining time available for Q&A.
So today we're delighted to introduce you to William Camargo. Camargo is a photo-based artist, educator, and arts advocate who lives and works in Anaheim, California. He received his MFA at Claremont Graduate University and his BFA at the California State University, Fullerton. His work has been featured at venues such as Chicago Cultural Center, Lois Ida Center, University of Indianapolis, and the Cooper Gallery of African and African American Arts at Harvard University. He was awarded residencies at the Artist Cooperative Residency and Exhibitions, ACRE, the Chicago Artist Coalition, Project Art, Otis School of Art and Design's LA Summer Program, and he was the recipient of the 2020 Lens Scratch Student Prize. Most recently, he was included in Vanity Fair's inaugural Silver List. He is currently the artist in residence at the Latinx Project at NYU. He serves as Commissioner of Heritage and Culture for the City of Anaheim, and he is founder and curator of Latinx Diaspora Archives. Camargo's 2020 exhibition, Origins and Displacements, Volume 1 and 2, organized by CSUF Begovich Gallery in partnership with CSUF Grand Central Art Center and Museum and Cultural Center, was presented to much acclaim. Currently, his work can be seen in Negotiated Frontiers at the Latinx Project at NYU. The virtual exhibition will be on view through April 30th, and I highly recommend it to all of you. So please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to William Camargo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Also, just want to make a quick land acknowledgement. Where I'm currently at, it is Tongva and Ashamin land. And I think that's a lot where a lot of my work started from, looking at histories, who occupy spaces. We are the borrowers of this space, and there's still a lot of indigenous folks out here that I think, don't really get recognized, or we think, they've moved away. But that's a little bit of my work that I do in the community is trying to bring that history and those counter narratives in front, and talk about the erasure that happens with history. I am a photo-based artist, a community archivist, and an advocate and an educator. I think those are all somewhat important to think about how we can kind of create these counter archives and counter narratives, and always kind of think about the canon in photography and in all these spaces, the archives as well. I like to start off with this because it's a reminder of home, which is still home, and I've been lucky enough to be back and create work about home. This was a home movie on VHS that was archived by XM Collective, who is still archiving movies of the Latinx diaspora in Southern California. If you look them up on Google or Instagram, they're taking, you're able to digitize your home movie collection. They'll give you a copy, and as long as they can keep one copy in their collection, it costs nothing, right? And I think that's that's partly due to the community collective that they want to, they don't want to charge folks to keep these histories alive. But still left for me is a movie still from I believe it was my fourth birthday in Anaheim, California. I think when people think of Anaheim, California, they think of course, Disneyland. But I didn't recognize it at that. I recognized it as a close-knit community. I had about, I would say, at least over 30 family members that lived in this kind of mile or mile and a half radius. Sadly, there's only 2 families left in Anaheim, California, and the rest have kind of been priced out, et cetera. And I think, the 90s was this kind of another wave of activism and as well in Southern California, right? We think about the riots in 92. And this was quintessential kind of Southern California upbringing in brown communities. You see to the right, that's my cousin, what one would call quote unquote like cholo. That was something that was super close to me. I grew up in that culture. And also, there's those histories that don't get told of that culture. And to the left is you wouldn't never see like a police officer come by the neighborhood, and that's something else was happening. And I think we all kind of related to each other. We asked for help. Our neighbors were helping us. It was a stop also for family members that migrated to the U.S. To make a pit stop at our home or my aunt's homes and kind of, go on to other cities that they were going to work at. Thinking about my own history, I thought about everyone that had stepped in Anaheim, that possibly left their mark in, in the city's history. I came back after a stint in living in Chicago, and one of the first things I did was always look at my family history, like my family photographs. I realized that I had family here that was here earlier than the 70s, than that I was told about. And also, some of the history that I did find about the city of Anaheim, about the racist policies that they had, the segregation, was all through this alternative weekly newspaper called the OC Weekly, which sadly is now a defunct newspaper. And, kind of taken out from that point, I thought about there must be some kind of documents that told me this information, that made this history valid, because, right, the people that hold the knowledge, that hold valid knowledge, in especially in academic spaces, were mostly white males. And I think when I was looking at when I was in school and grad school, learning from Black feminist scholars, their struggle was having to validate their knowledge, having to show proof that these histories did exist. So right, working twice as hard to definitely say we are here, like we are still here, and we're still going to be here. And I was lucky enough to find some images. This is a elementary school. It's an all Mexican school that doesn't exist anymore, but I think it still has a, that neighborhood that was in this area was a lot of the Orange Grove workers and the folks that packed the oranges all lived in that neighborhood, and it was made specifically for them, right? it's not ironic that this neighborhood, that the school still, the land that occupies the space now is also still predominantly Mexican American, brown or Central American. It's not, I don't think it's a coincidence. And I think history, we definitely have to think about history as a way to kind of to bring forth, but also to kind of restructure, deconstruct it, to include a lot of, what we have to say in our histories. I'm thinking about, burning the master's house and rebuilding it from those ashes, and thinking about like liberation for our communities. And when I was in an undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, I thought about the going to other places to document, to do my projects, and realizing that there were stories to be told in my backyard. My professor, who's still at Cal State Fullerton, Julie Orser, pushed me to think about what is there, what is still there, what are you kind of like ignoring in when you're making work. And when I did procrastinate a lot of the times in community college or in undergrad, I would turn my lens to my family because they were readily available. It was an intergenerational household, of course. And I think, not thinking that they were kind of, right, these stories were also valid to be told, especially when thinking about academia, not really seeing a lot of Black or Brown imagery from communities that that I would love to see that, right? I found out about Dewad Bay later on, not really kind of seeing them in slideshows when I was looking at in my photography classes. That project that I did in undergrad was able to come out and be published years later. This is, I was doing that project in 2011, 2012, and then 5 years later, Anaheim was again on the spotlight, but it wasn't, because of Disneyland. It was actually because of the low wages that Disneyland did give to employees. A lot of my friends worked there. I never worked there. Actually, when I was a senior, I would always tell myself, like, I don't want to work in Disneyland. I think, I think I was already conscious of what, the separation between the community and Disneyland was. And of course, between the 2012 shootings that were really close to, really affected me and really kind of led me to think about the history of the city, and that separation between those two, Disneyland and the community. A lot of I work in kind of like bodies of work, but they're all somehow like, interconnected. And I think, while I'm making work, I would just Google stuff. I would just kind of, surf the web. And this was like when I was rethinking of when I looked at, those images from my home movies, and I realized, and I saw these, that these tattoos that my cousins did have. And then again, looking at media, looking at what they were like kind of portraying Black and brown folks in those spaces, right? We see the kind of disconnection between media and how they portray folks, these kind of stereotypes that still exist. So I found this website that supposedly sells tattoos and sends their makeup artists to Hollywood film sets and create these personas of folks. And they literally have a tab that has prison tats on them. And realizing too that I have these quote unquote prison tats, and a lot of my family does. And but there's this projection that was given to these things, right? And this is what, these kind of two images are about, right? And I wanted to kind of make it a bit comedic as well. I think, I found friends that Yeah, that to the right is Jonah, right? I was, he only has like, I think 2 tats, and I think, and then my friend on the left has none, right? And I think uh, this double temporality of things that when we think about like, the things I was reading in academia, like, simulacra and Plato's cave, this kind of double temporality. And I also wanted to kind of little poke fun of it, but use it to in my work as this kind of, temporary tattoos, and then making temporary again with using tape. And I guess again, thinking that we hold these projections to Black and Brown folks, and the connection with the prison industrial complex. Knowing so many folks in my family have been in and out of prison. A cousin of mine just recently was out after 13 years and being incarcerated. And what that does to to our family, the things that we have to deal with outside, and knowing that some of the first things that do happen when police were coming into my community is lifting up the shirts or looking at the bodies of these of Black and Brown folks, and seeing that there were these tattoos that they can kind of connect with. With the neighborhood gang, etc. Along with that too, I realized that there was, these super personal ideas of who I was, and not realizing afterwards that there was these ideas of beauty that were kind of even being thrown around in Latinx communities. I think there's still this. I still think that Latinx, Hispanic still tries to kind of center a bit of whiteness in communities. And, knowing that I went to a 98% Latinx high school, there were still these issues of colorism, of, anti-Blackness and anti-indigenous notions, right? And, my connection with my indigenous community has disappeared because of colonization, but as well as that kind of robbing of identity. And this is one thing that I would do growing up, because I wanted a smaller nose, I wanted less indigenous features, and a simple gesture kind of portrayed that. I've been finding folks, friends of mine that have these kind of similar issues. And this is kind of a friend of mine being able to let me photograph this, that gesture of trying to get rid of this indigenous nose that are, and I think it's cross-cultural, right? There's a lot of these issues that continue to plague our communities. And we're seeing it every day now. And then recently, when I started grad school, I think thinking about grad school, you have to kind of think about your thesis show from the beginning. And, learning and kind of being in institutions for several years now, right? Community college, undergrad, and grad school. I still want to take some of those kind of contemporary structures and use them in spaces like my own. Again, using archives, but also, responding to those archives. And this signage series is, hopefully, I think in a couple of years, Origins and Displacements will be a book, and thinking that the signage series are going to be chapters of that. And I think, seeing these signs, I think about the work of Lara Aguilar, her series on access, having those same issues that she was talking about, how she can get access to, museums, and seeing how that has kind of left her, and sadly she passed away a couple of years, so she wasn't able to see some of these successes that she has, right? Like her solo exhibition being traveling across the country, and I think it is because of these economical issues that we deal with in photography. Is she's not getting her due while she was alive. You know, she's getting it afterwards. And you know, one point I always make is showing her work to my students, and also introducing folks to other photographers that they might not see on you know, through their academic career, right? So see, these are some of the, like, you know, images that I did find that I'm responding to. You know, the archives are there. I'm you know, privileged enough to have an education to be able to access some of these things, right? I think archives are sometimes inaccessible to community, unless we think about how we think about putting these you know, these archives in public spaces, which is something that I'm thinking about as soon as, you know, we're able to kind of be outside and kind of conversate about issues of these, is as a commissioner is being able to bring forth projects that are in cooperation with community. You know, not being someone coming into community and thinking that we know what the community wants. Even myself, that I do come from a community, you know, there's still that kind of relationship building that you need to have. And this kind of, I put this back to that first image is, that states this park used to be segregated, because in those days, in the 20s, this park, which is now Pearson Park in Anaheim, you know, I wasn't sure what side of the park was segregated, and knowing that, finding this image from the 20s of this brown baby in this area that I do know where it's at, thinking that maybe this side was the only side that Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks were able to be at. I think, you know, I think it was a huge finding for myself to think about, oh, the side where I used to practice soccer was the side that I wouldn't be able to go, you know, back then. And making those connections, right? I think archives and moments in histories, when not put to the forefront and kind of have to deal with it, is there's some kind of interconnection that happens with events, you know, that we're seeing today. And, you know, I kept continuing to still think about how to document a community along with the project. You know, I was doing these kind of performance documentation of my performances with the signage series, but I still love, you know, documenting the beauty of my community, and thinking about also like who I was seeing at that time and undergrad. You know, Stephen Shore is one that I always see and in you know, slideshows of contemporary landscape photography, and just in general, like contemporary photography. And you know, I his work is great, and I think I'm using these tools that I've learned, and kind of project myself into this canon. And I think there's been a lot of talk with, you know, friends of mine of what to think about when we think about the canon. Should we just kind of insert ourselves, or should we kind of rebuild it from the ground up? And I think that's one way to think about, you know, how to teach these artists such as Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, and think about them more critically, right? When we think about Ansel Adams and his imagery of nature, you know, I'm thinking about like Manifest Destiny, and you know, when thinking about like what kind of you know, work should we be introducing in kind of academic spaces, or even just, right? I mean, I still want to teach, and I still want to open up space for other photographers that look at me that don't really see themselves in the archive or in the, you know, in the canon. right? And this is again like thinking about the master's houses, like, you know, and this is a great book. If you know want to take a screenshot of it, um, asking those questions, and what we can do to think about, as you know, as the camera was used as a violent tool for oppression for communities of color, especially Black communities. And again, you know, thinking, you know, this image was made, and thinking how possible it was that, you know, 4 clan members were elected to the city council, and how 10 out of the 12 police officers during that time were also official members of the KKK. And it took me back to another moment in Anaheim history in 2016, when there was a KKK, a small KKK rally in Pearson Park, in that same park, which was segregated in 2016. And what was it? No, it was 2016, I believe so. You know, I didn't see it as a coincidence. I saw it as a reflection of our history, of our continued like legacy of white supremacy. And you know, I think the way I problem solve some of these issues is making work out of it. You know, I am still continuing this work of connecting these past moments in history to contemporary moments now. You know, why is it that we still have like de facto segregation in our schools? You know, it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence. It's a tool of white supremacy that allows these things to happen. And you know, I kept just documenting and thinking about these kind of banal moments too in my neighborhood. You know, the kind of resourcefulness that our community does have. You know, like I document with a medium format camera, a pretty hefty one, so that it's not me kind of like parachuting into community. You know, I used to be a photojournalist, and I think you know, that was always a concern of mine of having to make the work, but also again being in cooperation with them, not, you know, just coming into a new neighborhood and you know, being there for 5 minutes and then taking off. Obviously, I think photojournalism with the rise of the internet made it a bit harder, because we wanted that news faster. We wanted to see context so fast that those mistakes were made. And I think now being able to kind of actually concentrate and work more, that I allow myself to actually you know, be in community. And additionally, like I'm not just an artist, I also do some work in the community with mutual aid with the school district. You know, more like I would say 80% of the time I'm without my camera. And again, keeping, you know, documenting my own family. This is during the pandemic. You know, we're still in the pandemic. It's my brother giving my dad a haircut. All the barbershops are closed, and I think that's still a you know, these moments that we should really look back at and think about that. You know, our community was the one that was helping us out during this time. And you know, this image at the museum had a little bit of a kind of you know, the board of the museum was talking about this, because I think you know, now the packing house is kind of you know, I don't go to it much anymore. I think they're trying to think about how do you think about a historic place that definitely a lot of brown and native folks work there, and think about how it's now like, you know, I would say like now like the Grand Central Market in LA. It's been like gentrified, and I think you know, what it was before as a place for, you know, folks that maybe didn't have enough money to buy a whole space were able to kind of rent out a location there. You know, I don't think many folks from the community in Anaheim really go to this area anymore. But then again, like thinking that, you know, this was leased for very cheap. And, thinking of like, could have been leased for maybe a community center, a space that definitely served the people. Again, this is just kind of the continuation of doing portraits, doing landscape, along with the signage series as well, to kind of give a face to a little bit of who I'm talking about now. I think I also like to play around with titles. I sometimes have different titles and if something just comes up and I think about it later on, because when I did first take this picture, I think 2 months later, she told me that that her father, it was meant to be eaten, and that later on, that kind of like full cycle. And in some neighborhoods, I think, especially in LA, you'll see, chickens running around the neighborhood. It's, I'm thinking of, that's how my family was feeding themselves. And before they migrated, it was mostly from the land. They raised their own food. And that changed in Mexico with the NAFTA trade agreement in '94. And how it's so difficult now to kind of, and even in Mexico, to kind of eat from your own land. Again, I'm always thinking about photography as a cooperation with community, especially the way I work differently than than my counterparts in that we look at in photographic history. And even though this is like a older essay from the mid '90s, I think it still does a lot with how a lot of my friends work, and we think about, I'll just read it out loud. It's like, what does it mean to have, or indeed to be, with an image of oneself? And how is the image constructed? How is the image controlled? To have an image implies the rights of ownership. To be with an image implies a relationship, cooperation, community. And I think about, archives as well with this. It's like me running that Instagram. It's like, I don't declare that I have ownership of any of these photographs. If there's a community member that wants me to definitely show one particular image and they give me 5, then I'll show that one. It's having, I don't have control of that, that's the community's control. And I think it's a kind of, we're seeing this wave of like digital archivism and Instagram. And again, we're trying to change the narrative, right? We think about the Black archives, we think about Veteranas y Rucas. It's a different way of collecting these, sometimes these like ephemeral moments of community, right? From, I'm thinking of quinceañera archives as well. It's so different than and I don't have a degree in archiving, but I think it's a different way of looking at how institutions do collect work, collect family photographs, collect other objects, and also this wave of like Native American folks asking for their all their items that that these museums own. Hopefully someone wants to give me that degree. And I'll end it with this image, which is one of the newer series that I've been doing. And I'm just making sure that my knee is back so I can run again. But a different version of this image got me in a little fight on Instagram. And I never thought, John Davola was actually going to see this work. And this is, this work kind of, I wanted to share, like, I was so angry with what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, which, a couple of days ago was just the 1-year anniversary of a shooting, and how, there's still these kind of negotiations that we have to do as Black and brown people, and I think queer folks as well. with how we can kind of move around in a space that, again, 95%, Mexican American neighborhood. And I really thought about that image, those images of police cameras and people running away from police, right? And I saw that it was so uncanny to see that work, to see those images, and to see the work of John DeVoe that I had seen from, even from high school, that when I took one class, and then from community college on until now, right? If you're taking a photo class in California, in Southern California, like you're not going to be able to not see his work. And that kind of, I know like his work is not about, it's about process. It's about, these kind of contemporary notions of I wouldn't say nothingness, but, process and et cetera. But as being a brown person in these spaces, for me, it was way different. Like, right. Not only did sometimes cops would try to chase me to talk about, or to kind of turn my cousins, but also just running away from other quote unquote cholos or folks that, wanted to mess around with me. I made this work, and I thought about, again, the canon and how it is this kind of dangerous tool as well for, when we're looking at that, because his work didn't really, there was no worry about, about his white body running in these deserts. And of course, right, I wanted to do this in a neighborhood that, again, it's my own, that I grew up in, that I thought about this, and I thought about the alleys, the different parkways that, and also this, I think later on a car was at the end of the alley was like yelling at me, thinking he's like, that I was running away from someone, right? These things that you don't see in the photograph. And, I think about these relationships with space and our bodies as well, and how we have to kind of navigate them, because they're still, even though it's a predominantly brown community, it's still kind of, decided who gets to live, who not from the community, but from those who kind of impose these issues, these ideas.
Great, thank you, William. So reminder to all of you, please do include your questions in the chat, and we already have quite a few. If you don't mind, perhaps Andy and I could just read them for the recording as we go. Okay. First, there's actually, since we ended on the after DeVola piece, Kat has a comment. Kat says, I was disappointed yet not surprised to see such a reaction from a prominent figure like DeVola. Wished he took more time to appreciate your intentions. So I wanted to share that. Let's see here. So Linda has a great question. Was it difficult finding resources to create and distribute your artwork after graduating? Do you have any recommendations for someone with low income on what they can do to pursue digital and film photography? I've relied on my school's darkroom to print and develop my work, but no longer have access to that resource. And of course, with everything going virtual, there's a lot of people in that position.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm hoping, I would always say, like, I'm always telling folks, younger folks and folks that, look like me, I am a resource. And I think, I'm available to anyone that really kind of wants to get in there. And I don't have a darkroom myself. I just scan my work. But I can definitely point to that direction. And, there's few of us around, but I think we're able to really want to help out. I see that Virginia Arce is here. I don't know when the Irvine space is opening up again to the public for the darkroom. But there is, I think, some spaces that you can still go and develop your work. But I've gone to more, just scanning my film, because I still work all in film. But finding those folks that maybe have had some success and reaching out to them, hopefully their heads haven't gotten big enough to be able to actually even have a conversation with students and folks who just graduated. I look up at my mentors to, for, they send me emails, just check up on me. I was lucky enough to TA for Ken Gonzalez Day, which, his work is, his longest project on erased lynchings has been a great inspiration to my work too. I TA'd for him for 2 years, and he's been amazing in response to my texts, and I know he's sometimes busy, but he makes himself available. And I think finding folks like that is a really great asset. And you'll be surprised, like if you like someone's work, reach out to them, and I think hopefully they can respond. But you can find community on Instagram too, on these kind of digital platforms. There's based on Facebook, it's like photographers of color. There's Diversify Photo, which is a great space that I joined early on. And these things don't cost either. So I think, there's always questions that you can ask in those forums, and folks will reach out. Yeah, and I mean, it is, film is quite costly. I definitely agree with that. And I think, use your student ID still. If you graduate, I still use it and get that student discount. I don't think anyone from like, what do you call it? Freestyles here, right?
Consider using your iPhone if you have one too, right? Cameras aren't bad.
Yeah. So Virginia did add that, they'll be opening soon, like when it's safe. And they do have a very affordable darkroom. It's black and white, wet darkroom processing stations, and the techs are great there too. So
excellent. So Stephen has a question. Which of your works do you think was deemed the most controversial by the general public or critics? And how do you defend your art to those who don't understand it?
I'm thinking about like, who am I making this work for? I think if, obviously it's also too like, there's some folks that will never like my work, and I don't think I want to hold that grudge against them or try to make work that is somehow gonna make it like it, right? Because I think there's always this kind of internal issues that if folks don't like my work, because it's centering the quote unquote the other, like sometimes we learn in school, right? There was that chapter I remember in undergrad, it's like the other, which was like Black photographers, Native photographers, women photographers. I think I don't think it should be kind of, it wasn't a big kind of, I wasn't upset that people didn't like my work. I mean, the John DeVola stuff was like something that was kind of spoken about a lot. And I mean, there was a couple folks, but I really enjoy, like, the great support that other photographers, one I did have a talk with Paul Sapuya, who I had a conversation with a couple months ago, was a great supporter of the work. And I think, I was fine with that. It wasn't, I thought that John DeVola and I would have a great conversation about this work. I don't really like to, like, I don't say like, if I have to defend my art, I think that's an issue with them. I don't think, or I don't want to make anyone like show my work, and if they don't like it, like, that's fine. There's other spaces that I can do. And I think it's definitely just a collaboration with the community that I'm making the work about. And if I don't exploit that, like, I don't want to exploit folks for, for an image.
Rebecca has a bunch of great questions in the chat, but I had one. I hope we didn't, our time limit didn't cut your presentation off too short. I was kind of hoping maybe if you would talk about, as you continue practice with Latinx histories and perspectives. You know, kind of what's next for you? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, like I mentioned to y'all before, I you know, sadly I wasn't able to have a in-person exhibition at the Latinx Project, and that's a great space that um, that is you know, that's not too old, and I think it's a couple of years new. Um, that I think it's like everyone should be following to see what, you know, what's next in Latinx art. And so I'm working on on a catalog of that exhibition that I think hopefully will be out in April. And then a long-term book about origins and displacements in, I think, late 2022. But again, I'm, you know, hoping once we kind of go back to a somewhat normal is continue this collaboration with my own like community, right? I've been quote unquote promoted as co-chair of that commission, and we're currently working on the public arts plan. And you know, one of my concerns is how this plan is definitely going to have input from community, from youth, from our elders that live here, and because we want to see, you know, we want to see equity in the arts in my own, you know, in Anaheim. I never found out about the amazing murals of Emilio Vasquez that I would see every day, because it's you know, there's a mural right next to this park that I grew up on, and I never knew who, you know, who painted it, what was the story about, you know, and the pride that work showed about, you know, of being brown. I think that's owed to the community and to the youth that, you know, that are going to be the future of the city. And I think it's, you know, it's a universal process to, you know, I think I see that being something that many artists, you know, can work together on achieving.
It's really remarkable, William, that you have this position as commissioner and you're able to actually continue the work of your practice in this really, you know, sort of governmental public policy way. That's very cool. How did you get that? How did that happen?
The good thing is, like, I don't really have contact with the council members because they wouldn't like me. But um, it was through the only, well, I think he's like one of two Democratic council members in my district, Jose Moreno, who's a Chicano studies professor at Cal State Long Beach. You know, he appointed me, and then I had to get approved. And I think, you know, he realized what I was doing. You know, I was working with youth and community in Chicago in the years I was there, and I really saw, you know, Chicago as this place where, you know, there was this collaboration with the arts, and the arts were very um, liberatory to youth. You know, I saw the powerful things that that it was done with there. You know, I was working with folks in you know, Cook County jails as well, or folks that had just been released, and youth there too. And I think you know, I wanted to bring that here too. You know, thinking about my own community and how I was, you know, went through public school. I wanted to give that kind of opportunity for folks to learn about this, and public art is one way to do it, I think. I mean, I think art as an act of liberation is something that kind of I'm trying to kind of convey to, you know, not everyone agrees with me in city politics, because I didn't ever intend to be in a position like this. But I think they can have to get used to me. The first meeting I was there was, you know, they thought I was a youth commissioner. They, you know, again, you know, I come in with like these tattoos on my fingers, on, you know, everywhere. And you know, I think, you know, they never had seen someone like in a space like that. And I think it's, but you know, things have to change. And I think things, and they've realize that in a city that's like 54% Latinx, and it's just kind of diversifying overall, they have to kind of step aside and let us do some work in the city.
Well, that's great. So this is sort of a related question, and we may not really have time to like fully answer it, but I thought it was interesting that you talk about, mutual aid and working in cooperation is obviously really critical to you and your practice and your philosophy. Can you talk about how you approach, working in that way in communities?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to like work from home or work in my studio, and I think, I teach and I bring in folks to like these conversations. Like there's people that are definitely been affected by the pandemic. In especially in Orange County, it's been Santa Ana and Anaheim, and I think, with this privilege I do have to reach out to folks to donate. We've been partnering with like local nonprofits or nonprofits that help out with like food sovereignty and food insecurity. I think not until a couple of times, like, I mean, most folks in the community don't really know I'm a photographer or an artist. Mm-hmm. And then when we just have these daily conversations, they ask me what I do, and then they ask me like, oh yeah, like take a picture of us, right? And I think, because I put that aside for a bit, right? I obviously my experiences are always connected to my practice, and sometimes I do see something, and then I come back to it and photograph it, but it just kind of showing up as a hand, as a body to be able to give these registers to folks that have had things happen to them in these communities. Like we've been doing a lot of kind of like pop-up grocery markets where we just kind of make bags of groceries and hand it out to the community. I think every city, the IE has great mutual aid. Black Lives Matter ID has like monthly or weekly food distributions. It's like, if you're lucky to not, be over 65 or not be immunocompromised, give them a hand and help them out. But don't do it to feel good. Just, do it to serve the community. And we always kind of relay back to, the Black Panther Party of feeding the community and educating them as well, political education as well too.
Well, one question that we like to ask all of the Home Edition guests is, are there any artists that you would like to, promote or suggest for our audience?
Yeah, definitely there's quite a bit. I'll do one great one because I think it's a good friend of mine too. Her name's Irene Antonia Reese. She's an amazing photographer out of Houston, who deals with family histories as well, but also with this kind of idea of being Black and Mexican and like again, talking about like sometimes the anti-Blackness there is in Latinx communities and how that kind of affects Afro Latinx folks as well. Yeah, no, she's amazing. I think there'll be some shows. I was lucky enough to be in a show with her in San Antonio. This was like right when the pandemic hit, so I was about to buy my ticket to go see it, and we were gonna have all this. Yeah, it was an amazing show. Yeah, so that's her work. Again, like Paul Sequoia, I think everyone, like a lot of folks may know his work. I mean, it just like you have to see it. It's amazing.
Well, we can't thank you enough for your time and energy today. It's really been wonderful to hear about your process and trajectory and experience as a working artist. So huge thanks to you, William. And thanks to all of you who were able to attend and spend a little bit of your afternoon with us as well. Please visit us on our website. I think Roman put that in the chat to sign up for future episodes. And Roman will also include a very quick survey chat. Actually, it's probably already there. So if you take 2 minutes, we'd really appreciate it. But we thank you all. Thanks so much, William. We appreciate you and love your work. So wonderful to have you here today. And
Thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
also for being a resource for everyone who's here. That's beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, everybody. Please be well. Take care. Stay safe.